Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Kia ora Chewy, my love, how are you?
Kia ora, Pat. I'm good. It's fucking cold.
Yeah, I got snowed on today while I was taking the dog for a walk.
Yep, I did that. Elva's been inside all day. She was manic when I got home, so I took her down in the gully, and it was dark and cold and sleety, and she had a great time, and I almost died from hypothermia. It was bad.
It was actually, I had a bit of a relaxing morning for once, and I just kind of was chilling out, watching the sky go from no cloud to dusk at about 10 o'clock this morning. Like from literally just watch the cloud go across the sky, and then it was dark, just like that. And then after that, there's a look to the clouds. I'm not just saying here in Dunedin, but when the snow's about to come, it's kind of this weird sort of a grey look, and it's not a grey and rain. It's this funny grey look. And I was like, oh, this is what they've been talking about. And I live down by sea level, so we don't get a lot of snow down here. But we got hail and rain and stuff today. And then it went all blue again. So I took the dog up to the park for a quick run, and whilst I was up there, got a few flutterings falling upon me in 2 degrees. So ran back home quickly to get by the fire.
It's a solid plan. I believe that there's a higher chance of snow tomorrow as well.
Oh, really?
So that's fun.
I quite like it, eh?
I just want to show you this. Like, most dog owners go a little bit mental when it comes to their pets, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So one of the things that I got Elva for her first winter, consider this, right? She is a Swedish dog. She loves the snow. She's got her own jacket. What better thing to do than go and buy your dog a Swan Dry?
Did you buy your dog a Swan Dry?
I bought my dog a Swan Dry that she hates.
Of course.
she hates it.
She's wearing a puffer jacket, and you're saying, let's put this puffer jacket on top of your puffer jacket.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's good. $120. Well spent.
Terrible. Some good news, bad news in the world of Big Hairy News today. Well, I don't know if it's good news. But as we were talking about just by chance last night, got an email from Christopher Hipkins' office today. Hi, Pat. I wanted to come back to you on both the requests we have lodged from you. So I must start twice. Fair enough. We have now completed a review of election media requests received to date, and I'm really sorry, but we are not going to be able to participate with Big Hairy News this year. It's an extremely tight schedule, and I'm genuinely very sorry to have to decline your invitation on this occasion. So official, no Christopher Hipkins. It's official.
Well.
And I suspect no Christopher Luxon, and I think one of the reasons no Christopher Luxon, nothing official yet, is because we'll talk about this in the second half of the show. They don't need us. You know, the way they're polling at the moment, they'll be confident. Like, I imagine if it was going to be tighter in the polling, or if they were more concerned, they'd be going to the opening of a paper bag, but they probably on some level feel they can be picky and choosy. I'm not saying they would have come anyway, but I think that will be a part of the conversation as well. So that's I don't know. I mean, the Māori Party has kind of said yes, and I'm sure the Greens will say yes, but those other ones are saying no. The other ones are following the lead of Julian Batchelor and bravely running away, apparently.
Well, look, it is going to be the election of the minor parties, so I mean,
True.
Maybe there's some more interesting discussions to be had there.
True that. Now you've got a public service announcement.
Oh, what we were talking about just before?
Yeah.
I have been on Mastodon. Could not be better timing.
So this is the FBI, CIA now infiltrating your computer because you're about to say something negative about Mastodon, which I've been meaning to join and haven't got around to it yet. And now it appears will not be doing it based on some things that have been happening with Chewy today. Well, it's not really Mastodon, I guess, but as I understand it, Chewy, and I'm just kind of padding here. I'm padding until he comes back. As I understand it, it's almost like Mastodon is full of servers and you get to join a service. Like for you old people, do you remember in the 1990s a thing called IRC, MIRC? And you would join a server or you would join a group and that would be where you chatted. I assuming it's a bit the same as that. So Chewy's a part of a server and you've had some notification. I've used the word server, Chewy, for what you own, which means you can be other parts of other servers, but I'm assuming you can only be a part of one at a time. You can't be a part of like 12 servers at any one go.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the easiest way to explain this, and this is kind of one of Mastodon's advantages, it's also one of its key disadvantages, is rather than your account being hosted on a single server that everybody else is on, anybody can run a Mastodon server. So my address, I guess, is formerchildstar@mastodon.nz. There are other New Zealand Mastodon servers. But that was the one that I chose, and that's the one that I've been on there since the great Twitter exodus at the end of last year. And it's been sweet. You know, I don't post there a lot, but I do put up, a link to the show that we do 4 times a week and a couple of comments there. And there's a few of our regulars in the chat that follow me there as well. It's, it's a social media. I put up, some of my socials, some of what I do. Then last night I got this. So, hello from the admin team. We've been watching your account for a while, and it's apparent that this is not a personal account. The primary usage of it is driving traffic to your videos. Unfortunately, this goes against our rules here.
Personal videos, though.
Yeah, to your videos. Unfortunately, this goes against our rules, and the rule that they're referring to is no self-promotion, which is really broad. We'd encourage you to seek an alternate instance to migrate to.
So they're telling you to piss off, basically.
Yeah, get it. If we think of Mastodon servers as they like to, as a village, I am being run out of town by the village elders with pitchforks and such.
Who will play the role of the idiot?
Talk about politics.
Who will be the idiot if they kick you out, Chewy, in the village?
Oh, I don't know, but it's prompted this whole discussion around self-promotion on that particular server. If you have a band, are you able to post up videos or tracks? Because that would be self-promotion. I do stand-up sometime. If I say, hey, look, I've got a gig on, self-promotion.
What about what about if you just like put massive amounts of videos of your dog on?
Yeah, exactly. So what's self-promotion? They say that I look like a bot. Well, I'm not a bot. Hello. And I can't promote what we do, and they don't necessarily like conversations about politics because it can be divisive. Now, bear in mind, I've been doing this for a year, but basically, this is the first I've heard of it being an issue. So it's kind of weird, right? I got a whole bunch of people going, come over to this instance. There's a whole bunch of us talking politics. So it will be fine. But yeah, it's just one of the quirks of a completely decentralized social media platform, I guess.
There you go. Yeah, I guess what would happen is, I'm not saying it's the instance here, if you get like a particular little authoritarian running a particular server or instance, is that what you call it? Much like here in Dunedin, we have running a particular Facebook page that's quite big. Then my way or the highway. That seems kind of, you would think that's the benefit of the centralized issue, is that there's rules that are universal to everyone there in theory. Whereas in this instance, if they're decentralized, it's like that little Hitler can make that rule and that person can allow that and that person can allow that. And that can be where all the terrible people, so I don't know, probably pros and cons. Yeah. Seems weird though.
I mean, one of the major pros to it, one of the things that I really like is the big stick that Mastodon has is the idea of, it's a federation of servers. So if you really breach what the entire community sees as fit and proper, your little server can be defederated.
Right.
So, I mean, like anyone can open up a server. So, Uncle Joey's KKK and general race hate.
Oh, that's where I am.
Server
That's my one.
Can spin up, and then as soon as that gets found out, everybody will go, "Oh, there's a village of Nazis over there. We definitely don't want those Nazis getting out, so we wall it off, and it can't talk to anybody else, and they can just stay in there, and that's fine." But yeah, when it gets to an individual.
As is the case, though, once you do have that, for want of a better word, sensorial take on it, even the Nazis, then you get someone who has a particular bee in their bonnet blocking us from saying what we want to say. I don't know. It all gets a bit difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, I mean, this is one of the things where, a lot of people reached out to have a look at Mastodon when Twitter started having its problems. And I guess a couple of the really steep learning curves, right, is that not every server has the same rule sets or the admin team. I spoke to one of the admins at the start of like, what's this big influx like for you guys? And he's like, imagine having a house party with like 15 people that you know really well, you've known them for years, and then your party gets crashed. And they might be great people, but they arrived all at once, and none of them have taken their shoes off, and some of them came through the window, that sort of thing. So I get that. But yeah, it's such a broad rule.
Yeah, all right.
No self-promotion.
All right, guys, let's get on with the... Oh, look at me. There we go. I just flashed because it was my time. The CA got into my computer there for a second. Let's get on with the show. Before we do that, a big thanks to our patrons. Thank you for being a part of who we are. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News if you want to be a part of it. Thank you for those who have been involved and on board. Now, actually, I've been talking about having a meetup, haven't I? And I'm just reminded of that right now. So I'm going to write down here in big letters, MEETUP. And I will send out emails at the end of the show. Chewy, help me remember, and we'll sort out a meetup for this weekend. So if you're a patron and you want to come hang out, 11 o'clock on Saturday mornings we do it. It's always virtual. We'll do that this Saturday morning. I'll send out an invitation to everyone who's a patron this evening. And if you want to come and join us, then you just got to be a patron. Patreon.com/Big Hairy Nads. Sorry, news. I always get that wrong. Big Hairy News. All right, let's get into this, shall we? We're hearing that New Zealand might be for sale to the highest bidder should National become government. This morning on Breakfast, there was a conversation, which we'll start in a minute. There it goes.
New transport policy's got a lot of attention, but maybe not for the right reasons.
No, Anna, not for the right reasons.
That's it. That's the whole story.
That's it.
Very
not for the right reasons. So, thoughts, Chewy, around it not being for the right reasons?
Bad.
Bad.
If they're not for the right reasons, that sounds bad.
Got to be for the right reason and not for the wrong reason. That's what I always think, Chewy. If it's for the wrong reason, bad.
National's new transport policy's got a lot of attention, but maybe not for the right reasons. It's been priced up at $24 billion. Sounds like a lot of dough. But there's a question mark over where a missing chunk of money, nearly $10 billion, is going to come from. National leader Christopher Luxon joins us now. Good morning, Mr. Luxon. $9.25 billion of private funding. Where will that come from?
Well, look, there's a lot of pension funds, there's a lot of sovereign wealth funds that want to invest in infrastructure for long-term investment returns. What we're saying, Anna, is, look, we have a fantastic country. We want to be a leading small advanced economy in the world. That means we've got to have a modern and reliable infrastructure and roading network. And the way that we can do that, or part of the way we can do that, is actually using private capital and alternative funding mechanisms. And that just means we get to do more infrastructure sooner. And we also make sure that we don't give the taxpayer a huge amount of debt to deal with.
So the problem with that, obviously, is transmission gully is the example we've been talking about, and the private-public partnership, it's been said, led to huge delays. So there's no guarantees that there's doing this. And, of course, he's talking about the public not having more debt. How are we paying for it? If it's being put on mum and dad's credit card rather than our own credit card, so they technically carry the debt, but how's that debt being paid? How's it any different? Just some questions, just some thoughts.
Deal with.
It means we would rely on perhaps other countries, for instance, like China, to pay for the road.
Well, it means, there's a lot of pension schemes around the world. If you think about, sovereign wealth funds, a bit like our KiwiSaver account and other pension funds, there's $11 trillion that's around the world just in sovereign wealth funds, about $52 trillion actually just in pension funds in the top 22 countries in the world. They all want to make long-term investments in order to be able to give those returns to their investors. And so they want to partner with firms here in New Zealand and actually build and develop infrastructure. That's how things actually get done in other parts of the world. And for too long in this country, we've run it like it's 1975. We've got to modernise and actually imagine what kind of country we want to have in 2050 and beyond. So what we're saying is National's the government that gets infrastructure built, and that's what we're going to do.
Would you take money from China under its Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. New Zealand's the country, same size of Great Britain and Japan. We have 5 million people in it. A strong and resilient roading network will be absolutely critical to our future.
So very clear there, Chewy. Just need to, I know people heard it, and I'm not trying to patronise or mansplain, but will you take money from China? Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Now, probably fair at this point, and we'll get to this when we're finished hearing Mr. Luxon accuse Anna Burns-Francis of being xenophobic, as to what that actually means. So we'll have a look at Chinese money in other countries around the Pacific and how that's worked for them and what China expects of it when money gets spent on other countries' infrastructure.
And whether you're on an EV or whether you're on a hydrogen truck, you're going to need very good and resilient roads.
So how would you do the deal? Would you accept Chinese workers coming in to build the road?
Let's not answer that question.
Well, what we're going to do is three things. We actually need to make sure that we have what's called a 30-year pipeline that's going to be delivered through Infrastructure New Zealand. Secondly, we're going to do city and regional deals with local government, agreeing the critical bits of infrastructure and lock that up for 10 years so that projects don't get turned off, turned on again. And then we're going to make sure that we have something called the National Infrastructure Agency, and they will really work with partners to develop the right sort of financing and the right sort of partner for the right sort of project. And so that's those international companies or international funds that want to actually make investments in infrastructure will interface with that agency of government to be able to put.
We're going to talk a little bit later on about how much New Zealanders trust Christopher Luxon, as well as how much they trust Christopher Hipkins, because that's the poll results that came out. Just an example of answer the fucking question. Like, answer the fucking question. You get asked a question, the first thing you do is completely ignore it and talk out the other side of your mouth. I just wonder if that's one of the reasons that the majority of New Zealanders do not trust this man. I just wonder. Just a thought.
Put that program together.
You've just said, yes, you would accept money from China. Would you accept their workers coming in to build the road?
Again, that'll be a decision for the National Infrastructure Agency to make sure that they find the right part.
So it went from I won't answer the question to I don't want to answer that question.
For the right project. And that's what we're more interested in, is actually the funding and the financing and the partnership that would work with local firms actually to deliver new roads. Here's a good example. State Highway 29, which is between Tauranga and Hamilton, isn't scheduled to be delivered until 2048 in New Zealand under the current funding mechanisms. That's an example of a road that we could do in a public-private partnership, actually get built quicker and actually improve Kiwis' daily lives and open up tens of thousands of new houses along the way as well. And that's why we need to sort of have some vision and some aspiration and think about what kind of country we want to have. And I want to make sure we've got a leading small advanced economy in the world.
And they're all great points, but I just want to get right back to the point that if we are going to do deals with other countries, that they often expect something in return for it. So that's migration, or we rack up a whole lot of debt. So these all have flow-on effects. I know you're saying...
Now, remember what she's just said. She's basically saying a common response is either these other countries want interest paid, or they want to be able to, the people who are working here be able to settle here. That's the two examples she's given. Mr. Luxon thinks those two thoughts, which are examples from other countries, is pretty xenophobic.
Saying someone else will make the decision, but have you thought about it, whether you would accept an influx of migrants to come and build that road, and presumably they would therefore expect that they could build a new life for themselves in New Zealand at the same time?
It's not really going to be about that, Anna, because we're going to build a workforce here in New Zealand and make sure that we've got a good pipeline of projects so that actually companies can actually plan for that. The problem that we have in New Zealand, because there is no future clarity about what projects need to get built in the country over the coming decades, is that firms actually don't keep their workforce in place. They come into New Zealand, build a single project and then leave again. If they know there is a rolling program of work and a rolling set of projects, they build a workforce locally in order to be able to deliver those projects. And so that's really what this is.
Which, of course, you wonder the question with unemployment being so low, where is that local workforce coming from? Out of interest, just purely out of interest?
I know.
Where?
coming from China.
No, local. Because you're saying you build a local.
Yeah, China.
But
That would come from China.
that does make sense. That would be a mistruth.
It would be. China is not going to give us billions of dollars, trillions of dollars for all of these infrastructure projects out of the goodness of their heart. It does not happen. It has not happened. It will not happen. Christopher Luxon was talking about this glorious bitumen paved future that we have in 2050. It's just insane. Like,
isn't there also
dangerous?
Isn't there also the really interesting point that the party that we're looking at on screen right now, who's constantly using words like various isms, socialism, fascism, communism
by
from the
stealth
other
was
side, are the ones that seem to be wanting to work with the Communist Party to bring their money into this country. So Labour are the Communist Party in New Zealand, yet National want the communists' money from China. It's a strange juxtaposition there, wouldn't you say, Chewy? Kind of weird, that.
They also had they literally had an MP who worked for Chinese intelligence. Like this isn't like, we're through the looking glass here, people. Connect the dots.
Right.
It's real conspiracy stuff, but it's there.
We'll let them continue to connect the dots, shall we? Maybe Anna Burns-Francis will for us.
About. And I just say to you, all around the world, there are fantastic examples of these alternatives being used. Montreal is a great example. There is a new rapid transit system that started just 5 or 6 years ago that is opening this year. We've got a government, on the other hand, that's been talking about light rail now for 6 years, plans to spend $30 billion on it, and not a metre of track has been laid. So, there are there's a different way of doing it, and I want us to actually get things done in this country, and I want to build a really modern, resilient, future-focused country, and a big part of that is upgrading our infrastructure.
By focusing on ideas.
As a party, you're already complaining that we've got potholes and you want to fix them within 24 hours, and we don't have the workers to do it, and we don't have the money to do it. So if you're going to do it, you're going to need to bring in workers. And China's history, for example, in the Pacific, is that they bring in a workforce to do it, or that the country gets leveraged up with debt to do it. And I'm just wondering why you can't fill in the holes in those arguments.
Well, that's not going to happen, Anna. What I'm saying to you, that is not going to happen. That's quite a xenophobic sort of response and a pretty simplistic response, to be honest.
But he also said, right, he's just told her that's not going to happen, but he also said when she asked the question the first time, a different department will wait and make that decision. So which is it? Is the other department going to make that decision, or is that not going to happen? It's almost like he's saying the opposing thing that he said 3 minutes ago, Chewy. Kind of a little bit like that, maybe.
Honest with you, when you understand how infrastructure is built all around the world, Canadian pension plans, Australian pension plans are the major investors in infrastructure that we want to be able to tap into as sources of capital, so they can do long-term infrastructure development and get long-term returns for their members and their investors. But equally, New Zealand gets infrastructure built quicker, and actually, frankly, we don't get loaded up with more debt.
Have you approached the Canadian fund to see if they're interested?
I can tell you there is lots of money out there in the world.
Have you approached the Canadian fund to see if they're interested? You've just named them, and we know that China has a Belt and Road Initiative. So have you approached anyone else to see if they're interested?
This is interesting.
I can tell you, Anna, there is so much money, and there are so many funds that want to come and invest in New Zealand. And there's lots of them that have reached out to other partners in New Zealand, and also I've spoken to directly. And essentially what they're saying is it's very difficult to do business in New Zealand. It's very difficult to do business in New Zealand because we have a restrictive foreign direct investment process here. We're one of the most restrictive countries in the OECD for foreign capital to come in and make those investments, whether it's in renewable energy. If you think about actually wind farms and solar farms that we want to be able to do to double the amount of electricity, whether it's investing in roads and our network or investing in public transport options, there's a huge opportunity for New Zealand. I'm just saying to you really clearly, we are going to build a country for the 2050s and beyond. That means we are going to be a leading small advanced economy in the world. That means we've got to have some ambition, some aspiration, and we need modern, reliable infrastructure alongside some other things, as you and I've talked about before. We need a world-class education system. We need a lot more investment in science and technology. We need to make sure it's a friendly environment for business, and we need strong international connections. Those 5 things will drive greater prosperity for all New Zealanders, and infrastructure is a key part of that.
You just said you'd spoken to some investment partners who might be interested. Who are they?
Get him.
Again, lots of funds around the world, investment
Can you name
funds, actually have been interested in coming
name
in
one
to
that you've
talk
had
to
a
New Zealand.
conversation with.
I'm not going to do that, Anna. I'm just telling you there is lots of investment in the investment community. There is lots of opportunity for even New Zealand Super Fund wants to get involved in some of that infrastructure, other funds as well. So that's not going to be the problem. There is a big opportunity for us to actually say, let's lay up a plan for the next 20 to 30 years and let's go to work and actually get some things done in this country.
All right. So there's the message, believe it if you will.
Good
It's
Lord.
It's quite important, though, for us, before we move away from this, Chewy, just to have a look at Chinese money in other countries that have been doing this. So this is from a Canterbury academic. Her name is Anne-Marie Brady, and I looked her up. She's like a Chinese political strategist and expert academic in that area. So a few things, right? This is just what happens with Chinese money working on infrastructure, historically speaking, in other parts of the world. So from Kiribati to Vanuatu to French Polynesia, China has repeatedly tried to gain access to military significant airports and ports, all in the name of the BRI, which is the roading initiative. Beijing has established military cooperation relations with Fiji, Papua New Guinea and Tonga, and provided police support to Vanuatu and Solomon Islands, frequently in combination with humanitarian aid activities. Just this week, China and the Solomon Islands signed a security agreement despite the protestations of the Australian and US governments. China is rolling out the digital Silk Road in the Pacific, using its Pacific embassies to set up ground stations for its Baidu, I'll call it, satellite navigation system. So what they're doing is they're getting in, they're helping build roads, they're charging for their roads, they're charging them interest on their roads, and then when they're in the country, they're setting up some of their own infrastructure for China. Keep going. Meanwhile, China makes use of commercial operations for Baidu-equipped reference stations in the Pacific. Ground stations and reference stations work together to provide centimetre-level accuracy for satellites. Baidu is China's GPS equivalent and is now on par with it, if not better than GPS. Like GPS, it's military technology crucial for missile targeting and timing. The CCP's political interference and grey zone activities aim to co-opt Oceania political and economic elites to access strategic information sites and resources in the Southwest Pacific. The establishment of military installations in Oceania could substantially alter the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. It could cut off the Pacific Island nations, Australia and New Zealand, from the US. I think what they're meaning is literally a line. You think about going up through the Pacific, a literal line could literally cut off this part of the Pacific from the US and other partners, turning the region into a China-dominated vassal zone. China offers assistance with several projects, but, have we heard this before? Assistance, like with, say, roading. Assistance with development projects, but unlike most donors, the loan must be paid back with interest. The Cook Islands, Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, and Vanuatu all have crippling levels of debt to China. Pacific Island leaders tend to have a strong sense of history. Few would welcome dependency on China or the Pacific turning into a xenocentric order. Yet a degree of reactivity towards calls for vigilance about the CCP's malign activities is usually couched in anti-European, anti-colonial rhetoric. Given the continued presence of historic colonial powers in the region, it's been easy for some to conflate concern about the real dangers of CCP political interference and grey zone activities when expressed by Western actors with neo-colonialism and calls of whataboutism. So on one level they're saying, basically what they're saying is New Zealand and Australia, if you don't step up to help Kiribati, then why the hell shouldn't they go to China? Which on one level you kind of go, yeah, New Zealand and Australia stand up. On the other level, China's not just going, we'll help you with your roads. They're doing it for financial gain, which I guess on one level is fine. That's what a business interests are. But on the second thing, when they get access to the country and the infrastructure, they're planting things, military-grade technology that will help them should there be a World War III. I'm conflating a little bit, but help them should they need access to pinpoint, centimetre point precision accuracy when it comes to like GPS systems and, I don't know, when you got to launch something in a certain direction, Chewy. Sure. So that's what China has bought to other countries that's helped. The potential future prime minister of this country is saying, absolutely, we'll take their money. reporter says, what do they want for it? And he goes, that's xenophobic.
Yeah.
There's my case, Chewie.
It's incredibly short-sighted, and like I've said this a couple of times about national and just our political parties in general, right? Is we tend to go for the sugar hit. We tend to go for like, well, we're going to be here for 3-4 years. Maybe we'll get a second term. We're going to do stuff quick. And when we're dealing with a country like China that traditionally thinks in very long term,
Yeah.
right? They think in decades of development.
If not more.
Belt and Road's been banging around for near 20 years as an idea and as a concept. And that goes hand in hand with China's expansion in the Pacific. They know that as things change, you're going to need a resource. This is exactly the same reason that Japan went on all crazy during World War II, was to expand their resource base. They know that they are going directly head to head with the largest military on the planet, the largest navy in the planet. So if they can gobble up as many Pacific bases as they can,
yeah,
and they know that they can play on the anti-colonial sort of stuff, because the empires have fucked over the islands for hundreds of years. So that's just over. And in comes Christopher Luxon going, I hear someone's got a bag of money. I haven't really Googled what Belt and Road is and how everybody else is dealing with it. I'm sure it's fine. What do you mean Sri Lanka's bankrupt? What do you mean that there's countries in Africa that are having to give Chinese bases and mineral rights because they built them a highway? What do you mean we're now surrounded by Chinese naval bases, and now our traditional ally in military matters in the Pacific, whether we get on all the time or not is a different story, but traditionally, you know, as many have mentioned in the chat here, that, you know, we still have strong ties to the US. If we're ringed by Chinese naval bases during, let's say, a Pacific war for resources, you know, maybe the climate's gone haywire and China needs to move a lot of people out of unsustainable parts of China.
Yeah.
You know, it's real, like, yeah, maybe it's a little bit Tom Clancy, but I worry about someone who has really short-term thinking and is going into this basically. He's going into a negotiation. He's not armed for it.
I like that comment a lot by Mr. Anderson. You can smell the yuan on his breath. For those of you who don't know, we're talking former Prime Minister of New Zealand, David Longing. I can smell the uranium on your breath in the middle of a debate he was having, I think at the Oxford Union. I can smell the uranium on your breath. Shows my age. I was actually looking for another chat because I think one of the best chats I've seen come across, which I don't think we've starred, and I apologise, is especially when it comes to this thing about talking about debt. And I can't give credit to who owns it, but someone in the chat said it. I appreciate your thoughts. This is not my thoughts first. Is it's basically being put on HP as opposed to being put on your own mortgage. You know, and we all know how much more expensive HP is. It's still debt. It might be a small lot up front, and a big lot out the back. Whereas going on your mortgage might be a big lot up front, but it's much cheaper in the long run. So let's not stop this bullshit about there's no debt in this, as Steph says as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's nonsense. The other thing, Chewie, and I know you hate it when I do this, because when we get kind of in the same camp as Winston Peters, it always makes us feel a bit dirty. But this makes for interesting reading after the poll results out tonight and what we talked about last night. Winston Peters said today, any government New Zealand First is a part of will not be taking money from China to build our vital infrastructure assets. We need to get control of our assets and our future. We should be investing in our own long-term infrastructure assets. God damn it. Not looking, you feel dirty, don't you? Not looking for funding from overseas in some Belt and Road project. China funded their own roads in their own country. So can we? So can and should we? So I don't know if there's any real talk about Winston being there after the election yet, but if he was and if they needed him, then I guess, more than mind you, we've heard before Winston wouldn't take the baubles off office, and he did. But if he's there, that could be a bottom line, and that could keep Chinese money out of New Zealand, but he's not. I don't think. I personally, I know what's going to happen is if I say he's not going to be there and then he is, it'll be clipped all over the place, but my gut tells me he won't end up being there, but that's where we're at.
I mean, while Luxo Flakes was talking, I just did a quick Google on Belt and Road, just Belt and Road Initiative. In the span of a decade, China has emerged as the developing world's bank of choice, pouring hundreds of billions of dollars in loans into global infrastructure projects as part of its sprawling Belt and Road Initiative. But as its borrowers fail to pay up, China is finding that its newfound authority is coming at a price. Eager to recoup its money, Beijing is transitioning from generous investor to tough enforcer.
Wow.
Did China's Belt and Road Initiative destroy Sri Lanka? July 9th, 2022. I assume Luxon hasn't Googled this. How a Chinese-built highway drove Montenegro deep into debt. Malaysia cancels 2 big Chinese projects, fearing they will bankrupt the country. Now, everybody else seems to be taking this lesson. And Luxon's not seeing it. How can you not see this?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is where we're going to have to try and figure this out, and maybe this again, we're going to get onto the polling. In fact, we'll probably do the polling now. Should we do the polling now, or should we do Trump now? Which would you can choose, Chewy, polling or Trump? Which would you like to talk about?
I do polling, but I'd also want to bring up one other thing that obviously Luxon's bringing up Canada, right? He lived there for a while. He knows all about it. Montreal, second highest tolled city on earth.
Yeah. Actually, let's get to some more of those. Let's get some more of those chats now, because we'll move on to a new topic.
Yeah,
so
there's some good ones here.
Yeah.
There's your comment. It's still debt, just HP, not a mortgage.
Thank you, Steph.
That was Steph. She's all over it.
Freestyle. Freestyle.
Rob Burney
Steph
says he's going to build a country for the over 50s. More like it, not the 2050s. Yeah, they won't be here to see the disaster. GM, absolutely. China and US eyeing up the Pacific. They are both trying to shore up their positions. Very strong links for the Americans in Australia, and a lot of potential conflict points in between. The South China Sea is an absolute minefield as far as what happens in the future, and China knows it. Everybody knows it.
Can I throw something out there as well? I'm just looking up as you're talking, because he's talking about all these, retirement funds, and they're talking about spending, $2, $5, $10 billion or whatever it's going to be. The New Zealand Superannuation Fund at the moment currently holds $58 billion.
Yep. And
holds
if they
58
contributions. If National hadn't have stopped contributions to the Cullen Fund, it would be even bigger still.
But surely that's enough money to do it ourselves and to reap the benefits of it ourselves, rather than, as Steph said, putting it on HP.
Well, yeah, because pension funds are looking for a good return on investment, right? And these projects are a good return on investment, and we have a massive pension fund.
So let's give it to ourselves.
That's right. Time is a circle. What the hell's going on?
So let's break this down into super simple man time. That's me. Super simple man.
Super simple man time. We need a splash for that.
If I had let's say I had 10K to invest in something, and I knew it was a really good return and I could afford it, right? It was sitting there and I could afford it. But I went, you know what? That person over there, who generally in life I don't necessarily want to see get better, do better than me, and I think I'll get them to invest in it instead so they can get the return. That sounds like a sensible idea. What would be the rationale for me doing that? Honestly, what would be the rationale other than there are some, I'm not saying literal behind the scenes handshaking going on, but what happens in the future? Where does person X making that deal pull a favor back the other way? I don't get it. It makes no sense at all as to why you would give this fantastic business opportunity, this fantastic investment opportunity to a foreign nation, rather than basically giving it to yourself or giving it to your own country's, retirement funds or financial, whatever it was. I mean, what could be a reason? I don't know.
You mean your dealings with a famously corrupt country with a whole bunch of money?
Well, yeah. I mean, let's even not go down that too much conspiratorial part. But anyway, giving it to Australia, giving it to America, if we could afford it ourselves, and the investment could. So in other words, the investment would go back into the superannuation fund here, making it stronger and better. Why would we want to give it to another one rather than to our own? I just want to, even if it's wrong, I want to know one one realistic reason as to why that could be thought about being done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I do have one little conspiracy theory, just saying.
Of course you do.
Yeah. John Key, when he sold his house,
Yeah.
massively overvalued, sat empty for years and years and years, and then someone sold it at a massive loss.
Right.
Why do you think someone would pay way over the barrel for John Key's former property? Like way outside of its evaluation.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Just saying. But yeah,
Right.
like I would love to know the reason why if there's all of this money sitting in our retirement kitty, and infrastructure is a great long-term bet for retirement funds and that sort of thing, why can't we do it ourselves?
I guess the second stage would be, because like Steph said, HP or mortgage, even if it doesn't come from a consolidated fund, us New Zealand government borrowing it itself is still going to be cheaper than getting it on HP from China or any country. So in other words, paying for it ourselves out of our pension fund would be great. Borrowing it would be, would cost more, but would still be cheaper than getting it from another country who probably are going to borrow it themselves and then charge us more interest on top. I honestly can't see the rationale. Like I can't, other than National going, we're not the party of debt, so we're not going to borrow, even though borrowing might be the best thing.
Yeah, this fear of borrowing, this came up during Three Waters and that sort of thing. This absolute fear of debt, the idea that you've got to run a country or a council like a business, is just so fundamentally broken by neoliberal ideas, right? If you are building a highway that is going to last for 50, 80, 100 years, right? If you're spreading the debt over that period of time, who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
Like it's irrelevant at that point. You would have gained so much productivity, whether it is a road, or whether it is a better rail transport network, whether it is better electricity generation. We've talked before about the Think Big project and how close, and I think this is maybe where it came from, right? It came real close to bankrupting the country. But we have had decades, near 50 years, actually probably, exactly 50 years of energy production and productivity out of those projects. So although it was pretty close to the line at the time, it has still been worth it now.
Yeah. All right. Hey, let's keep tracking, shall we? Because there's another fairly big story to look at tonight as well, and that's the latest Newshub. Is it Reed Research? I don't know, whatever. Newshub polling that's come out tonight. We talked last night about the Roy Morgan, and we talked about looking for trends. There are certain trends in here, but this is a really perplexing poll, Chewy. And I think I put in the description for the show tonight, the incredibly enthusiastic, people who really want to try and find something good in this for Labour. It is sort of within margin of error, but you have to be pretty, looking for something OTT for that. But let's have a look. This is a 6-minute clip, but we're going to do it in 3 parts. And the first part is really just talking about what the results are, and then we'll move on to a couple of other bits from it as well.
The public has sent a decisive message to Labour tonight. They've had enough of the drama. Labour's series of scandals is centred on a downward spiral.
With our latest...
Even that's not necessarily true. One of the stats here says that people think that Christopher Hipkins sort of handled the Kiri Allan thing quite well. That's what the poll says. But a reporter has to have a headline to interpret what people are meaning when they tick a box. So I guess that's what it is.
Newshub Reed Research poll giving National and ACT the numbers to comfortably form a government. Well, our political editor, Jenna Lynch, is here with the numbers. Kia ora, Jenna.
There will be no happy chappies or chippies in the Labour camp tonight. Labour diving back down to the low 30s to 32.3%, a drop of 3.6 points. The exact same result it got in this poll just before Christmas.
Love to.
Labour 32.3%, down 3%.
Diving.
There's the absolute death spiral.
Yeah.
Newshub Reed Research margin of error 3.1.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Let's not be silly here and say no, it's fine. But if you were trying to find something good in this poll that's not that crash hot, you could argue if you wanted to, but based on yesterday's poll, there is a downward trend for Labour. We've got to say that. That's fair.
This is
Right?
just more a commentary on these absolutely hyperbolic
True.
stories about polling, right? It's a disaster. It's a death spiral. Actually, it's within the margin of error. Who fucking really knows?
Yeah. All right.
Before Jacinda Ardern stepped down, before its great reset. Labour's loss is National's gain, popping head and perhaps not quite shoulders above to 36.
So basically, what, they're four and a bit points apart. Margin of error is 3.1, but now head and shoulders above. You know, fair enough. Fair. And remember again, if the red team's so bad and the blue team's so great, only gained 1.3 out of that. What does it say? I tell you what, I wonder if Luxon's getting to a point where he's a bit nervous about Seymour. In all honesty, I heard some commentary today.
Nervous about Seymour.
I heard some commentary today talking about if, in fact, it might have been last night on Bomber's show, talking about if Luxon has two choices, New Zealand First and ACT, the very serious conversation of maybe not using ACT and going with New Zealand First, because Luxon should be concerned about Seymour.
0.6%, up 1.3. The miners are having a major moment. ACT inching toward the teens, 12.1%, up 1.3, and the Greens shooting up to 9.6%, up 1.5 points. Moving to the minnows, look out, here comes the comeback.
So last night we talked about, I didn't believe that Top was on 4% and New Zealand First was on 5%. Again, one poll doesn't make a difference, but this probably puts them more at a realistic sort of space as to where they were. New Zealand First on around 4, Top on around 1.5. I think that's probably more realistic for Top. I still wonder as well, though, the people who don't participate in these polls are sort of 18 to 30-year-olds. So I think any poll you see has probably got a slight, I'm not saying it's a big swing, a 0.5%, a 1% swing, a small swing towards parties that attract old people with landlines, even though I'm not saying it's all landlines, but, 22-year-olds don't do these kinds of polls. 52-year-olds and 102-year-olds do.
King, New Zealand First, 4.1%, up 1.1. Is Winston on his way back? Te Pāti Māori slipping slightly,
so.
2.7%, down 0.8.
That poll last night had Te Pāti Māori at 6%, so that's a pretty big discrepancy.
Drops to 1.5%, down 0.5 point. New Conservatives, no change. Seats in Parliament, where it counts, 61 is the magic number. Labour's 42 and the Greens 12. That's 54 miles off. Assuming Te Pāti Māori wins an electorate seat, they get 3. Even adding that to the left, only 57. There is no path.
There is no path, so they're talking about they're up by 3 seats. We don't do this, we don't project in this show because it's a waste of time. But when they're projecting, there is no path. I guess it's accurate to say on these numbers, but if you think about it the other way, what is 3 seats out of 60? Well, 6 seats would be, so they're 5% off. 3 seats off, being part way there. I mean, not sugarcoating it, not saying it's good, not saying they'll get there, but yeah, as Chewy has said, the hyperbole,
to power here, but Nationals 47 and ACT 16, 63 seats. The government benches are awash with blue and gold, the right commanding control.
So maybe what we can say now, Chewy,
Fuck.
What we can say now, perhaps this is fair based on this numbers. We've been saying all the way through. I felt that Nationals had its nose in the front. Whether it's 59-41, like as in the chances of winning, maybe you'd say now it's 55-45, because that would be the 5%. If National lost 5% of the vote, they'd be on 60. If the left gained 5% of the vote, they'd be on 60. So maybe at the moment, the odds are 55-45 National to win. Maybe. I'm just throwing out numbers.
Here is Labour's small.
Hate this reporting.
Okay, let's keep going with the thing that you hate there.
Yeah.
Saving grace, the
'Cause listen,
PM's
look at this.
popularity. 24% chose Chris Hipkins as their preferred Prime Minister, up a smidge, while National's got its
Down.
own personnel problem, Luxon's likeability, or lack thereof.
Yeah.
He's fallen to 15.9, down 0.5, and his mate over to the right is gaining on him, David Seymour.
So this is what I'm saying.
Oh, Jesus, fuck.
11% to 16.
Someone with a bit more charisma than Luxon could be David Seymour.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Looking at those results, which when I listened to the commentary I was just referencing, these results hadn't been out yet, but Seymour is becoming a threat to Luxon, Imagine if Seymour gets to be more of a preferred prime minister than Luxon. And how do you have a party? This is the thing that I've got no idea. Maybe we need to get one of our pollsters back on. I've got no idea how you can have a party that in the numbers seem to be dominating the other one, but nobody like the leader. You know what I mean by nobody. But so it's just a really strange. Now, does that mean that there's just a strange anomaly in society at the moment, or does that mean that these numbers aren't all that trustable? I'm not sure, but that means 37% of the people said we want National to be the government, but only 16% of them went, we want Luxon to be the leader. It's really bizarre.
I don't like this ride, and I want to get off.
There's one more bit here, actually. I'll just play the end of this a little bit before we move on.
And the Hipkins honeymoon is a distant memory.
That was the end of it anyway. I'm going to play the second clip a bit later on. So there you go, Chewie. There's the numbers. It's a really weird one. I think it's really weird that I think other commentators have said, like all the way through, that if you're not preferred prime minister, you're not going to win the election. These numbers are saying otherwise, unless they're right, unless that margin of error is actually something. I don't know. Or it could be an anomaly. It could be that people just hate the left so much that, you know, a dog turd could be the leader of the National Party and they'd still vote National even though the dog turd smells. I don't know. It's a very bizarre result.
Yeah, it is. I think the real danger here, and I've been very vocal on this, I hate the style of reporting around polls. I absolutely hate it because when they start using that language, National and ACT are going to romp home, absolutely dominant performance. The House is awash in blue and gold. That when that gets through to people, they go, well, there's no chance of Labour going to win, so I'm just not going to bother. I can do something else with my Saturday. I'm not going to go out to the polls.
How much the media can influence people's voting. Winston Peters used to bang on about there should be no polling allowed to be released for like the month before the election. He only used to bang on about that when it didn't help him. I'm sure he's not saying that at the moment, but he used to. Hey, here's some other interesting tidbits from this. And I'm not going to play the whole article because we don't need to get the gist of it. Do you think Christopher Hipkins handled the situation around Kiri Allan's resignation well or poorly? More than half of the people said well. Only 1 in 5 said poorly. That's actually a really interesting result as well, which means whilst the voters of this poll, of this research, might be going, that impacted who I want to run the country, for what it was, Chippy did pretty well in the situation, which I think is a really interesting look.
Yep, no, absolutely. Because I don't think there is a lot of criticism. But certainly National and ACT were really trying to drum that up. They weaponised that against Hipkins straight away.
Yeah.
That he wasn't quick enough, or he forced her back. And remember that narrative that they were both trying to tie together, that Hipkins forced her to come back to work too early. And of course Luxon wouldn't do that. He would demand a doctor's note, which is something you can't do. But yeah, I think that's a good sign that people saw through that, I think.
Yeah. Well, and then that probably comes down to who do you trust? And let's have a look at this as the last thing from the polls. Is just a screenshot. Who do you trust? Do you trust the leaders? 47% of people do not trust Christopher Luxon, yet 51, nearly 52, 51.5% of people do trust Hipkins. So 1 in 3 people, round figures, trust Luxon. Half of the people trust Hipkins. What is that? Nearly 1 in 2 people don't trust Luxon. And 1 in 3 people don't trust Hipkins. Again, if National's riding so high and they're doing so well in the polls, and Labor's such an absolute nightmare, what's going on? How is this research showing these numbers? How is the research saying National on top, yet we hate everything about National leadership? It's really weird.
I mean, that trust thing is so important, right? Because it doesn't necessarily go along with political allegiance, right? So take me as an example. I am not Chris Hipkins' biggest fan at this stage.
Yeah,
he's ruled out some policies that are real button issues for me.
Yep.
But you put that aside when the question is, do you trust him?
Yeah, but do you trust him?
Yes, I trust Chris Hipkins to do what he says, whether I agree with it or not. Do I trust Luxon to do the same? No. I do not trust him to follow through on the things that he said, for good or ill. I just don't believe the guy. So, yeah, it's so important. Like, trust in the leader is important, right? It should be important. And it goes hand in hand with likability as well. You don't like a liar.
JC has just asked as well, what's the undecided percentage on that poll? It didn't come up in the story. I don't have it on me. When I play my next video, I'll go have a look on the Newshub website and see if we can find that for you, because, yeah, that would be an interesting thing to check it out, because I didn't actually say that. I guess we could probably work it out, couldn't we, if we went 32 plus 36 is 68. That's 70, that's 80, that's 89, that's nearly 90. This will tell us whether it's of everyone 90. Yeah, so their percentages are out of the people who know, because they're at 90, 95, 96, 90. Yeah, so the percentages they've given, because it equals about 100, are the percentages of people who have said, so they haven't put up there the don't knows. So, yeah, so I'll see if I can find that out as as I play the next story about Donald Trump, which is coming up. Is there anything in the chat you want to get to while we're doing that?
Oh, there are a few things. What have we got here? DIY Guru says the Hipkins bread and butter centrist focus makes sense strategically. Greens are Te Pāti Māori for the left vote. I don't know if I agree whether it makes sense strategically. I think he's contesting a battle that is easier for him to lose than win by going for them.
Right.
But yeah.
Can I interrupt there? Let's do this now.
Yeah.
Talking about strategic voting. Here's a clip that I saw today. Now, people love or hate the Young Turks, TYT, but I'm going to play you a clip. This is completely unrelated to what we've been talking about, but it's actually related to something we're going to talk about tomorrow night, talking about the strategic vote. Chewy, you know, I've told you about this. So this is Cenk Uygur talking on the, what is it called? The Ruddy Big Prick, the PBD, the Ruddy Big Prick, whatever it is, podcast. And this is what he said today about, they were talking about, you know, kind of ideologues voting. They were talking about, you know, far left people voting and you know, trying to push through policies that only had 2% of the public support. And this is what he said today.
Character in the first place. If Trump is as bad as I think he is, would I want to run a super weak old man who doesn't even want to campaign against him?
Yeah.
A guy whose popularity is oftentimes in the 30s. Here's a giant lie of the mainstream media. Only Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump. Wait, why? First of all, tons of people can beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump's in the 30s in approval rating. Jim Jablowski can beat Donald Trump. The only people who can't beat Donald Trump are establishment Democrats who are deeply unpopular because they're fakes and they're phonies, right? So they say, oh, Biden beat him last time. He beat him by 43,000 votes in 3 swing states. It doesn't matter how much he won the popular vote by. The Electoral College, he only won by the skin of his teeth, and he was 15 points higher at that point. The Democrats are walking into a slaughter with their eyes wide open and saying, I would rather lose to Trump than have a progressive as our candidate.
So that's the question. That's the thing I wanted to look at. I would rather lose to Trump than have a progressive as a president. So what he's saying in America is, rather than someone who is further on the left or someone who is more progressive than Joe Biden, they would rather put Biden up and lose to Trump than put someone more progressive up. And coming back to that comment you just had, Chewy, I mean, can you bring it back up to remind me exactly the wording of it? Tomorrow night, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about strategic voting. We're going to talk about people and where you put your vote for a strategically versus your ideology. So your ideology might be, and it's not as black and white here in New Zealand, because if you're a left voter, you really only have 2 options. But your ideology might be, you know, minor party, tiny party that's not going to get there. Do you vote for that tiny party, that minor party that doesn't get there? Or do you give your vote to the bigger party to help your side, quote unquote, side of politics get through? And I think the left side of that in New Zealand is, do you vote at all? Because people run away from voting, especially when they feel disenfranchised from it. So do you vote at all, even if you're not completely happy with where Labour is, or do you not vote based on your ideology? So we're going to talk about this tomorrow night, and we're going to have Bomber Bradbury joining us to talk about it as well. So Bomber's going to jump in and have a chat with us about this conversation. I don't think it's actually a story conversation, like as in a headline story, but we are going to be talking about this idea of, do you vote with your ideology, or do you vote strategically or tactically, and where do you put that vote in this upcoming election? As I said, I don't think it's as obvious for the left in New Zealand, but in general, the left in New Zealand, their strategy would be not voting. Their strategy would be, I can't be bothered, right, versus voting for someone on the left. So is that the strategy, or is it biting the pill, voting for someone you don't want to vote for to help your side get through? Or do we need to burn the house down to get something decent in the future? Like, do we need to go through a few cycles of the Donald Trump type character, whatever that is in New Zealand, to get a decent, decent people standing in the right places in 10, 15, 20 years from now? That's sort of the conversation and the question from last night that I thought I'd mentioned at some stage. That text just reminded me, bro.
And I'm just going to put this up. We will make it very clear which one of the windows on your screen is bomber and which one is fake bomber, aka
we'll keep doing this, and just to trick people.
Yeah, it'll be a game. It'll be a fun game. We'll all change our display names to say bomber, and then you can just guess.
Hey, I think it's time to talk Trump. We've got to get into this, or else we're going to be here all night.
You cracked the lid open.
I got up this morning and heard this news, and then I put my headphones on and I jumped onto CNBC, which live streams on YouTube. And for the next 2 hours, I just listened to all these conversations that were going on. I'm sure you've heard the news, but let's have a look at Donald Trump. It must be Wednesday, because every Wednesday Donald Trump gets charged with criminal activity. So another one today. It's just another Wednesday.
The pursuit of accountability for one of America's darkest moments, reaching its most critical point yet. The former president now indicted for his alleged role in historic efforts to interrupt the peaceful transfer of power. Special counsel Jack Smith revealing the specific allegations in what has become the U.S. Department of Justice's largest investigation ever.
Charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding.
The indictment details how Trump allegedly worked with 6 unnamed co-conspirators to cling to power, relying on pervasive and destabilizing lies about election fraud in an effort to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election by using knowingly false claims.
This is really important. We'll get to this in more detail as we go through this. We'll only be here for 10 minutes or so. But obviously what's happening is Trump's lawyer and Trump are claiming that what he's being accused of is not actually what he's being accused of. Ironically, they're misconstruing the charges, Chewy. But we'll show you exactly that before we get to the end of this bit.
Frankly, we did win this election. We did win this election.
All of it culminating in the storming of the Capitol building.
As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election.
In a statement, the Trump campaign said the charges are reminiscent of Nazi Germany in the 1930s, the former Soviet Union, and other authoritarian and dictatorial regimes.
One of the important things to know about this, and Chewy, you'll probably know this better than me. Let me just get my little Trump troll out of the way, is that ironically there was a thing called the enabling law brought in I think 1933 by Hitler. The enabling law basically gave Hitler the right to move around the democratic process and stay leader of Germany. So when Trump says this is like Germany in the 1930s, he's actually comparing himself to Hitler and is not aware of it, because he's the one trying to go around democracy like Hitler did in 1933 with the enabling law. And he's like, so he's correct actually. What he's too stupid to understand is that he's Hitler in the example that he's giving. So he's right, but he's just too dumb to understand what exactly he's saying about what happened in Germany in the 1930s. He's the Nazi in the situation, literally and figuratively.
Trump has always had a lot of admiration for dictators and strongmen. So I don't know. I don't think he would have read a book about that, but somebody might have told him about it.
Yeah. All right, we'll get into the story.
The former president has long denied wrongdoing, alleging any and all criminal charges are politically motivated.
This is prosecutorial misconduct, and its primary purpose is to steal another election.
Trump is
irony being he's been charged with knowingly spreading false information as he continues to knowingly spread false information. How's that going to go in a courtroom?
Already facing dozens of charges in New York related to alleged hush money payments to an adult film star, and in Florida over allegations of how he handled classified documents after leaving office. It's also very possible Trump could be indicted a fourth time.
He does.
In Georgia for alleged election interference there. Speculation about charges forcing local officials to ramp up security.
So, Katie, can you walk us through what happens next?
No, we're done with that. Because there's a bunch of other stuff we want to show you as well. So this is really important, right? So these are the charges. This is what we have to make sure that when you're talking to Uncle Bob on Facebook about this, or Telegram, or Rumble, and they keep talking about free. Actually, maybe what I'll do is I'll play the. Right, we'll just play this first, actually, because this will give you more of an instance before I correct the record. Fox News today, the actual lawyer for Donald Trump was on there talking about what the charges are. This is what he had to say.
Is former President Trump's lead attorney on this specific case. He joins us with his first public reaction. John, thanks for being here. You heard what the special counsel said. You've read the indictment. Your client's been talking about it quite a bit today on Truth Social. Your thoughts on this?
It's a terribly tragic day that we find ourselves in, where political speech now has been criminalized.
Speech.
Where an existing
political speech is being criminalized, is what he's saying.
Justice Department, Merrick Garland, has a boss. His name is Joe Biden. And Joe Biden's running against Donald Trump.
No, he's not.
And losing currently. And now we have that justice.
Not true. No, there's actually no candidate for the Republicans running for president right now. There's people trying to be the candidate. He's not running against them. That's incorrect.
Justice Department indicting President Trump for actions that he took as the chief executive of the United States with respect to public policy matters. So now we have the criminalization and the weaponization of public policy and political speech by one political party over another. And it's not surprising when it comes. It comes on the heels of unbelievable allegations against Mr. Biden and his son, as well as the fact that Donald Trump is leading in the polls right now. And now we have what essentially is.
So if you're leading in the polls and you commit a criminal act, you shouldn't have charges brought against you. That's literally what the lawyer's saying.
There's a regurgitation of the allegations in the January 6th report, which was highly political. It really reads no differently. So it's really an astounding document, because for the first time in American history, a former president is being prosecuted by a political opponent who wields the power of the criminal justice system for what he believed in and the policies and the political speech that he carried out as president.
So the lawyer's trying to sell the idea that the criminal, what he's been criminally charged with, is what he believes in.
This is unprecedented.
What he believes in and what he said.
It affects not just
Donald
Trump.
And that's why he said, sorry, this is just giving me some shit. Get out of there. And they're claiming it's a free speech situation. So that's what the lawyer is claiming. The lawyer is claiming that the charges are based on thought and speech, which obviously couldn't be further from the truth. Because as it says here, the indictment brought by the special counsel Jack Smith outlined in stark detail how Trump and his allies knowingly spread false allegations of election fraud. So that's an action, right? Not thought or speech, knowingly spread false allegations. They convened fraudulent electors, that's an action, and attempted to block the certification of the election, that's an action. So it's actually got nothing to do with what he was thinking or his speech. The indictment also listed 6 co-conspirators who have basically all been named now, because a lot of them are people who have already testified, and the what they've done in the media has done is they've linked up the testimony to other testimony. You know, co-conspirator number 4 said this, and then they've gone and find that was Rudy Giuliani or whoever the person was who said it, who played central roles in the plot to keep Trump in office. So it's not words, it's actions. While they were unnamed, the descriptions of 5 of the 6 matched those of Trump lawyers Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, John Eastman, Ken Cheesebro, as well as the former U.S. Justice Department official Jeff Clark. One other thing, the 4-count, 45-page indictment charges Republican Trump with conspiracy to defraud the U.S., not speech, by perverting the Congress from certifying Democrat Joe Biden's victory and to deprive voters of their right to a fair election. Not speech in that, it's about actions. Then President Trump pushed fraud claims he knew to be untrue action. Pressured state and federal officials, including Vice President Mike Pence, to alter the results, and finally incited as an action, a violent assault on US Capitol in a desperate attempt to undermine American democracy and cling to power, which is what prosecutors said. So the defense is they're trying to criminalize what he thought and what he said. The charges are all about things he allegedly did. Chewy.
He did a coup.
Allegedly.
Like, it's, you know how you get lawyers come on and they defend their client passionately with their big lawyer brain? That guy seemed like he was straight from a fucking comment section.
Yeah.
like I've read some stuff on Truth Social. I put on my suit and I go down to Fox. It's mental. It's mental. I love when we look back at this and we remember that it actually happened. They elected Trump and they're still dealing with it. They've had hundreds of years of basically functional democracy. And then they thought Trump would be funny and they almost had a coup. I still feel like I'm going crazy every time we talk about anything to do with Trump.
There's been some
mental.
There's been some really interesting commentary today. For example, there's been a little bit of criticism by some on the right that why has this come out after 2.5 years? And one of the assertions is that to charge a former president, you better have everything lined up to the T. So some of the commentators I've said today is these guys could go tomorrow if they wanted to. Because normally what would happen is charges would come and then you'd get your case together. But before they're going to bring anything against a former president, they're going to have to have everything absolutely nailed down. The other thing is one of the defenses for Trump might be that most people around him, including people in his circle he trusted for his whole tenure, were telling him it was over, he couldn't do anything. But there were some lawyers, potentially some of those unnamed sources, who were advising him that he could do it. Now that means, could he claim the idea that it was his honest held belief because he was getting advice from lawyers? The thing that I think the Justice Department is salivating on is if he claims that, the only way he can really provide evidence for what he truly believes is to get on the stand. And I think from what I've seen most lawyers talking about, the Justice Department would be, they would probably they'd get a bit of a chub on just to think about getting Trump on the stand. A man who can't not incriminate himself at the best of times, but probably the only way he can clear himself from they might try and use some surrogates to say what Trump thought, but the only way he could probably truly clear up what his honest held beliefs were to be able to say them in a courtroom on the stand, which will be fucking fascinating.
I think anybody with half a brain would be trying to very, very hard to keep him off the stand.
But if he doesn't do that,
to happen, Pat.
Yeah, I agree. But people I've seen today, and it is day one, are all saying the same thing, which is that's really the only way to clear your name as to what you believed is for you to tell people what you believed, because no one can really disprove you. No one can really go, you don't believe that, unless they have evidence to the contrary, which they may well do through various records and other witnesses. But for you to convince someone what you believe, you need to tell them what you believe. Where does that happen? That happens in a courtroom in this situation, which will be, if it happens, I don't think it will, but if it does, well, I mean, the OJ trial of the century, that'll be gone into oblivion compared to this one, if that was to happen.
I mean, of course, Pat, I am a correct thinking person. I want to see him dragged from a courtroom crying and pissing himself in handcuffs and straight into an actual jail with bars. I don't think realistically any of us think that's going to happen. But if it does, like, they would have to be worried from a security point of view, right? That all of these people that have made Donald Trump their entire personality in a country that allows the stockpiling of weapons and ammunition, that is going to be a real problem, right?
Yeah, because they've got all the guns.
I mean, I have issues saying that phrase won't happen
Oh, that might be, but is that what? But is that what?
Anything to do with Trump? Because
no, but that might be won't happen. Hang on, Benny can confirm this. That I suspect that won't happen to him being on speaking in court. That's what I suspect Benny's saying won't happen. He won't take the.
Oh, I'm just talking about general. The use of that phrase.
Yeah, okay.
Whenever you're talking about Trump.
Fair.
Like, Donald Trump's running for Republican Party and he might get in. I said it won't happen.
Yeah.
Oh, if he loses, there'll be a coup. No, won't happen. You know, Trump has a magic power to just go, oh yeah, no, that's too crazy. It's never going to happen, and then it fucking does.
Here's the thing, right? Free soul. Trump can make a plea deal tomorrow, maybe tomorrow withdraw from the race. The reason I don't think that will happen ever is that I would suspect if you're going to have a plea deal, part of it would have to be things like you must not ever spread these falsehoods again. And that would basically be tantamount to Trump publicly saying he was lying. Because if he's never going to say it again, something he's talked about incessantly for the last 2 or 3 years, then that's why I don't think that's possible. Because I don't think you could do a plea deal with someone and then say, yeah, you can keep spreading those lies. You know, it would have to be restrictions on what he could say, and I don't think he'd be willing to put those restrictions in place. So I don't think it will happen. I mean, but then again, won't happen. I've just said it, Chewy. Maybe, who knows? As you've just said, who knows with Trump?
Yeah.
All right. Anything in the chat we want to get to? Anything we want to throw out
there? There was one that made me laugh. Paul here says, every hour on the hour, the last half hour. I love it.
All right. Hey, thanks for being a part of us tonight, team. Appreciate you all. Thanks for being involved with our beautiful patrons, patreon.com/Big Hairy News. I'll be sending an invite out after the show for a meetup on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. If you're available, come along, come jump in and say g'day. If you're not available and you want to, become a patron. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And if you become a patron anytime before sort of midnight on Friday, you will get sent the invite to come and be a part of it's just a little hangout we have. You know, we have sometimes 5 to 10 people just come and join in a group chat, and we just hang out. And I like to hear from you guys, and I get ideas from you guys and get feedback from you guys. But I'd love to see you on Saturday morning. Expect that invitation at some stage tonight or tomorrow morning when you're waking up. And also remember, if you're not a patron, bless you anyway. Enjoy the content. Other ways you can help us and support us. You can be involved with the audio podcast, which is scrolling along the bottom of the screen at the moment. Subscribe to it, and then if you use Apple in particular, make sure you rate and review us. I've had to send a few comments in the reviews there. What we do is we often through the weekend put out clips as well. So even on the audio podcast, we put out clips, and people seem to be enjoying that. They're able to pick and choose what they want to listen to rather than all the ridiculous tangents that we go on and go off on through the full show. So yep, we do clips and we do full episodes in the audio podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and of course Apple Podcasts as well. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News to become a patron. I'm done. Shall we anything else there?
I just thought of another t-shirt idea that might be good.
All right.
BHN, the hour-long podcast with 50% extra.
Hey, 50% free. Pay for 60 minutes, get 50% free.
The best 90-minute, 60-minute show.
All right, guys. Thanks for being with us tonight. Appreciate you all. We'll catch you tomorrow night. Now, remember, tomorrow night we will be doing news of the day, as we always do, but we'll also have Bomber with us to talk about this idea of voting strategically versus voting ideologically. I think that's a pretty fair way to synopsize it, isn't it, Chewy?
Yep, absolutely.
Strategically, for where you want your government to come from, versus ideologically. I mean, a good example is in Epsom. I don't know if it'll be the same these days, but for a long time, Epsom has voted strategically as opposed to voting, ideologically, because lots of people in Epsom wouldn't have voted for ACT, but would vote for Seymour. So that would be voting. As I said, it might not be the case today because ACT has obviously risen in popularity, but for a long time that was the case, where they voted for an ACT member, even though they were national supporters. They voted strategically rather than ideologically for that person. So we'll talk a bit about that tomorrow night, and be involved. And Bomber's going to be here from 9. So if you want to get involved in that conversation, get here at the start and bring a friend, as we always say.
Bring a friend. Hit that like button right now. Do it. Do it. I'm watching. Go on. Do it now. Do it. Yeah, all right. Some of you have. That'll do. No, it won't do. Keep doing it. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Catch you tomorrow night from 9 10. Appreciate you all being here. Hooroo.
Cheers, man.